Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, race fans. Welcome to tonight's coverage of the season finale of the HCCL GT4 Challenge, live here on TRTN. As always, I am Regan Clark. You join us at the end of the line here on what has been a fantastic championship here in Season 1. At the very end of this championship, getting a look on that calendar right here, after 2 weeks of hiatus, after a very, very hectic round in the Hungaroring that saw a victory for Flitzer Flop for the first time this season, we find ourselves at the end of the road, with the championship already having been wrapped up in favour of the man on screen at the moment, the 119 of Christian Lebay. You join us from Spielberg, Austria, right here at the Red Bull Ring. Originally founded as the Österreichring in 1969, but reopened as the Red Bull Ring in 2011 when it was purchased in 2003, it consists of 10 turns and 2.6 miles of FIA Grade 1, the de facto home of the Austrian Grand Prix in both Formula 1 and MotoGP, as well as being an appearance on the TCR Europe and DTM calendars. And also up until 2021, it was part of the European Le Mans Series calendar as the 4 hours of Red Bull Ring. Today, though, it's the home of round 8 of the championship here in the end of Season 1. We stay on board for the time being with Christian Lebay as we quickly get into the discussion over the course of the 20 minutes we have here for free practice over those balance of performance tweaks for round 8. And getting a look here, Chevrolet find themselves joint in class for the best current result for kilo reduction. That was with Ginetta and Alpine, all of which getting 14 kilos shed coming into round 8. Then Aston Martin off by a single kilo there to that mark, 13 kilos as opposed to the 14 there for the V8 Vantage. BMW loses 2 kilos coming into this round, and then into the positives, Porsche gain 1 kilo, so a negligible difference compared to how things have been for the 718 over the course of this season. Mercedes and McLaren, though, seemingly worse off for it, 12 and 20 kilos for the AMG GT4 and the 570S. Sadly, no qualifying predictions for today. Data insufficient to give us a comprehensive top 10. And you can see it's a very quiet affair here. With everything already won, there is nothing left to lose for these drivers. So for the ones that do show up, it's all bets off and gloves off with them, as we could be seeing some very solid racing today with absolutely nothing left to ride on. Looking at those championship standings, of course, Lebay wrapped things up quite early doors in this championship. He dominated from start to finish. Now he finds himself currently 39 points up the road from Vladislav Mizin in second place. Asahi Ota third with 137 points, stands to potentially get up into the second place position by the end of this championship. Flitzer Flop fourth place ahead of Anthony Valorio in fifth. Tom Wells in sixth with Stephen Sutton in seventh. Manuel Verzi in eighth place and a joint ninth then for Wright with 65 points, joining him at the back of that top 10. Timo Tosto also with 65 points as we head into the final round of the championship. Across the line then with Christian Lebay to set the first times on today's free practice session of 1:36.702. But as it's seen there, it was an invalidated lap. So for Lebay, that won't count onto the charts, of which we pull up here to the left-hand side, are still completely bare. And see up the road from him there, that's Carlos Diaz in the number 32 Aston Martin. Also out on the track at this time, the number 54 of Wright. Now he's already up into that top 10 we saw. Now joint 10th with Timo Tosto, or joint 9th, I should say. It has been a curious story for this Porsche. Late entry into the championship, and he's found himself quite nicely at home by the end of Season 1. So heading into future endeavours, he's absolutely within his chances to fight for championships here in HCCL. I can name definitely a few examples of what's coming up in the future. We'll get onto that a little later on in today's stream, over where he could next pick his fight. He's currently on his way down towards turns 9 and 10 down at Rindt and Red Bull Mobile. As a matter of fact, whilst we're on the subject of corners here, let's stay on board with Wright and get our unofficial tour around the Red Bull Ring, all 10 corners and such. And I think with it, what it lacks in complexity, this track makes up for with fantastic opportunity for side-by-side racing. We've seen it to be an absolute riot every time it's been raced on here on Assetto Corsa Competizione, and straight off the bat into turn 1, a very tight opening right-hander into the Niki Lauda curve. Then as we head uphill past what is a very slight kink to the left at turn 2, you can see flanking him on either side there. That's actually the chicane that comprises the MotoGP layout there to your left and right, up through turn 2, then into the heavy braking zone here for turn 3 at Remus. We've seen side-by-side action from all walks of motorsport. Very rarely does it exit with the same kind of endeavour that it entered with, usually an opportunity for contact. Down another open straightaway section down towards Schlossgold and a parabolic open hairpin right. Very tight on entry, then opens out, so allows the drivers an early doors opportunity right past the apex to slam the throttle open and get that car away. As we head now through turn 5 in towards Rauch at turn 6. Then down towards the Worth curve. We're currently at turn 6 now. Worth curve coming up and turn 7. That almost loops back in on itself for the run into turn 8. Very easy for the drivers to get over the lines there, as you just saw for Wright over the course of that lap. I'm pretty sure he has just invalidated from that run there, but it was looking very, very quick for him so far. Last lap of 1:36.887. He makes his way down through turns 9 and 10 at Rindt and Red Bull Mobile. Down towards the line. It would have been an improvement had it not been invalidated. We'll see what the record says across the line. It wouldn't have been, regardless of 1:37.335. Not his fastest lap, but it was still looking very, very quick indeed for Wright. We see here with Diaz up the road from him as well as Christian Lebay in the 119. We also have the 55 out on track now. Asahi Ota stands the opportunity to potentially overtake Vladislav Mizin in the championship standings by the end of season 1, moving himself up to second with Aston Martin. A very limited grid today as well. I mean, this is the consequences of when the championship gets wrapped up early. A lot of people do end up losing interest, and since this is the final round, this is more or less an exhibition run for those who remain in the championship. The 119 pulls it to one side there on the run up towards turn 2. That leaves the stage a little bit clear here for the 979 of Flitzer Flop with McLaren. It was a brilliant result for the German last round. Took his first win of the season back in Hungaroring. That was a hectic round indeed. Now he finds himself riding on that high all the way into round 8 of the championship. One of 2 McLarens in this race, the other being Anthony Valorio, behind him on track at the moment in the number 41. He's going to be seeing a less than ideal benefit under balance of performance regulations for today's race. To bring that back up, McLaren find themselves with 20 kilos slapped on top of their 570S, Mercedes with 12, and Porsche with 1. When we're talking just positive weight gain, then you've got the negatives there from before, and it seems joint first for 3 different manufacturers for the most amount of weight shed off between Ginetta, Chevrolet and Alpine. With no Ginettas and no Alpines present right now, it's just Chevrolet, more specifically Christian Lebay's Chevrolet, that's going to see any kind of benefit under BOP today. Down to the line though goes Flitzer Flop. We'll stay on board with him over the course of this lap. About 10 minutes left to go in free practice before we're on for 20 minutes of qualifying today. Then another 60 minutes of racing before the end of the line here in Season 1. It has been a fantastic championship. Looking into those previous race wins over the course of Season 1 so far, you can see with that last round being in the Hungaroring 2 weeks ago, it was a win for Flitzer Flop. Before that, it was a hat-trick of victories for Christian Lebay that ultimately tied up his chances to take home the Season 1 championship. Before it, it was 2 wins back-to-back in Germany and Great Britain for Vladislav Mizin. And then with the season opener, we saw that great turnaround drive for the 55 of Asahi Ota dancing in the rain over in Monza to take the win off of Christian Lebay in the 55 Aston Martin. Staying on board with Flop, makes his way down towards Rauch. You can see, despite the balance of performance tweaks, he doesn't really seem to be struggling all too much to keep that car in the clear and narrow. He's actually been able to use quite a hefty chunk of the available space on track. You can see he's really leveraging the car through in towards turns 7 and 8 there at Worth. Making his way down towards turn 9 and 10. So coming down towards the line, Flitzer Flop, we'll see what time he puts on the chart there. 1:36.650. So looking at it there, second fastest after that last lap just gone. Lebay leads by only 55 thousandths of a second ahead of Flop. And we see Valorio now fastest by 200ths of a second, putting himself ahead of Christian Lebay. So a very tight top 3. And despite the fact we only have 6 cars on today's final grid, there could still be a great argument here over who takes home pole position. As you can see, not too far away at all. 3 tenths thereabouts for both Wright and Ota. Those two separated by about 78 thousandths of a second to one another in 4th and 5th place. So think of this more as a sort of greatest hits run, as it were, here in Season 1, with a lot of the drivers now just in it for the thrill for the end of Season 1. Asahi Ota now fastest by a whole 10th of a second, and then, get this, 8 thousandths on top. So for the 55, is looking very, very grand here. He started the season off with a win. Could he end one with another? Only time will tell. Bear in mind, we're only in free practice here, so before we get onto the run into qualifying, we're already seeing the intensity start to ramp up among our remaining 6. Discussing the future with HCCL, we're happy to announce that we are currently in the process of getting signed on for the Carousel Cup, of course, coming up on November 29th, starting with the M2 Cup, so then we'll be moving over the course of the next couple of weeks over toward GT4s, of which we're seen here prominently in the GT4 Challenge Series, and then rounding things out of what is 3 rounds over at the Nürburgring with GT3s. We're happy to announce that we are working very closely with HCCL to get signed on to that project. It is looking very, very grand indeed. There'll be more to discuss in the near future. Also, something that has crossed my desk has been considerable talk about Project Motor Racing. Now, bear in mind, it's not too far away now from release. There is still a lot of hype surrounding that. HCCL have been speaking with us in private about potential opportunities there, so do keep a close ear to the ground for any updates out of them in the official spaces. We can't confirm anything here, nor that we are at liberty to do so. Know that there is at least some talk. Personally, I think Project Motor Racing is going to shed quite a sizable light on what people want out of the console sim racing community, and you can see here with ACC that there is still quite a lot to be discussed in terms of the community, but obviously this isn't the greatest example because we've only got 6 drivers left. But this is the end of the championship right now, the final round, with the championship already having been won by Christian Lebay. There's not an awful lot left to gain for a lot of the grid. This is just drivers showing up for the love of the game. You really got to respect it at that point. This far into the championship, Valorio second fastest, then Lebay third fastest. Those 3 separated at this time, front to back by 128 thousandths of a second. Really, one thing I want to point out is how McLaren have been able to sneak their way up into the top 3 with 20 kilos on top of that 570S. Anthony Valorio has really been wringing every ounce of time out of that 570S. Across the line he goes, sadly to no improvement, as we saw a sizable kick out through turns 9 and 10. Next to the line at the moment, the number, looking at it here, that's the 32 of Diaz. Across the line to an improvement by, looking at it there, that was 0.8 of a second. So great chunk of time there gained from the 32 Aston Martin. He's still at the back of that top 6, but about to drop, by the looks of things, into that sub-second barrier. Next to the line, the 119. So is it fight back here before the end of free practice for Christian Lebay? Yes, it is, because now he goes up and ahead of Anthony Valorio. Moreover, he puts himself within 1/4 of a second to Asahi Ota in the leading Aston. The question therein remains, with a grid this small and with competition nowhere near as impactful at this time for the already declared champion of Season 1, are we going to see perhaps a little bit of brakes being pumped here for the 119 of Christian Lebay? Is this a little bit more of a Sunday, or I suppose more namely Saturday drive for the Camaro? Only time will tell us different. Currently trailing Flitzer flop down through Schlossgold at turn 4. 4.5 minutes left to go then in free practice before we get on to qualifying today. That'll be 20 minutes against the clock here in Red Bull Ring. I will say one thing that's always been pretty solid about the Red Bull Ring, especially on ACC from our point of view in the commentary box, has been that the camera angles have been some of the best. Really, they truly have some of the most cinematic angles I think we've seen in a long time here on ACC. Of course, the newest track to have been added came along with the GT2 DLC. And rather ironically, this was probably the driving factor for a lot of people behind getting that DLC. I have actually still yet to see GT2s anywhere near as relevant in the ACC space compared to the GT4s, which came out way, way before them. Are we perhaps seeing here, with about 3.5 minutes left to go, a little bit of practice battling between Flop and LeBay? We'll stay on board with these two. LeBay now fastest in the session, so he's gone up and ahead of Asahi Ota now after clearing 25 thousandths of a second. We'll see exactly how far did he manage to put the time on there. That was 0.2 of a second. So when you pick up that 25 thousandths between him and Ota before that point, he's made an improvement of nearly 2.5 tenths over the course of one lap. So very, very solid performance from the 119, as to be expected. Of course, he didn't just fall into a championship win. He really did have to dig deep and earn that one. Battle of the V8s then. McLaren versus Chevrolet down towards turn 9 and 10. Right now, as we're still on board with Flitzer Flop, you can see he is up by 0.2 of a second. LeBay's into the pit lane. Across the line, he's up to second fastest. So all of that sort of pushing and shoving between the pair of them, almost a little practice fight, has actually been the intensity that Flop needed to dig deep for that improvement. Up by 0.2 now to the second fastest, a 1:36.445 for the McLaren. Last round's race winner, of course, so still looking to make that potentially 2 on the trot. It's still, this is probably one of the best situations we find ourselves in, because as mentioned, with the championship already having been won, there is nothing left for these drivers to lose. So it is really all bets are off, the gloves off with them. We could be seeing some of the most intense fighting out of this very small remaining grid we've seen in a good while. You see here with Wright now 5th place with Porsche. Bear in mind, only about a minute left to go in free practice, so for a lot of drivers now, it's just settling down in the pit lane, getting ready for the run out onto the track for 20 minutes of qualifying. We're also happy to announce as well, with our continued collaboration with HCCL, that you could be seeing us on the multi-class championship for Season 3 coming up in 2026. We are looking forward to seeing how that pans out. Right now, after that last lap, Wright still finds him very nearly a 10th away from Anthony Valorio in 4th place, currently on that 3rd row alongside Carlos Diaz. At the end of free practice, the session officially over. We stay on board here with the 54 for a moment. Further up the field from him, the 55 of Asahi Ota and the 979 of Flitzer Flop, all down through Schlossgold at this time, with the 55 just out through Rauch. In towards turn 9 then. This is Asahi Ota and the number 55 Aston Martin. We saw a great performance by him so far, and as mentioned before, could he end the season on a high? He was looking very fast before the end of today's session. Can he still be fast as he gets toward the checkered line? And he does. Goes up to fastest by 38 thousandths of a second. A bit of a delay across the line for the Aston Martin, but now fastest at the end of free practice. The last remaining car on track then, Wright in the number 54, making his way down to the line from what was at the back of that top 5. Without further ado, as we get down towards the line, that's the end of free practice. with a great lap there from the number 54. 20 minutes of qualifying underway then, already out of the pits. We see rolling in formation then, pretty much as they joined. Almost a bit of a Le Mans start we're seeing here at the end of the championship for Christian Lebay, Flitzer, Flop, Wright and Velorio. Our first four onto the track there. Hesitation from the twin Aston Martins of Carlos Diaz and Asahi Ota, but Diaz is out. That leaves Ota, the only driver left in the pit lane. Let's get on board with Christian Lebay now. Of course, we mentioned we sadly don't have enough data to hand to give you a comprehensive breakdown of the qualifying predictions. We can try to pull up any recent data packets to see what there is, what we can try to piece together coming into this round of the championship. Right now, it's showing Lebay predicted at pole position, so little surprises there for the Chevrolet, the already crowned champion of Season 1. That's his second GT4 championship after the Competizione Performance League GT4 Pro-Am Cup America Series that he won less than a month before. Currently, the predictions have it pitched Lebay, Flop, Ota, Velorio and Wright. But it neglects to mention Diaz in that mix as well. It actually showed data for Dion Helgilian, another one of these Chevrolet drivers, but they've neglected to show any data surrounding 32 Aston Martin. So we'll see where they stack up here on this, what is currently 3-row grid. So we're on board with Christian Lebay, and we'll stay on board with the Chevrolet to become the first driver to go onto those flying laps. You can see rolling in close formation, Flitzer, Flop and Wright in the 979 and the 54. Sadly, this telemetry not giving us much to talk about there, as it's continued to count his outlap as part of his current flying lap. That's a constant issue we found here on ACC. It's one of the main reasons we don't often show the laps in progress on the top left. Through in towards Worth Curve. Still following closely on his trail. I want to point that out. Flop is not too far away at all. If anything, the gap has started to close in this middle sector for the McLaren. It's only since just opened up a little bit for him past turns 7 and 8 down at the Worth Curve. So down towards turns 9 and 10. We're still on board with Christian Lebay, but we're going to pull up our timing charts to the left-hand side and see as these first 4 times come rolling in thick and fast. Out of turn 9 in towards turn 10 we go. Let's see how it stacks out. It was already quite up in the air as to who could come out fastest at the end of free practice. It's no too different coming into qualifying. So first across the line, Lebay to give us our benchmark time, 1:35.9. Then Flop, then Wright. And we can see already a very close spread there. Next to the line, the 41 of Anthony Velorio. This could be a major upset to that top 2 across the line. But sadly, no time on the chart there for Velorio. So he has to go around at least one more time before we get to see anything from the 41. Focusing our attention next to Carlos Diaz on his way down through turn 9, then to turn 10. We'll see what time he puts in on the chart. At the worst of it, it can only be provisional 4th. Across the line comes the 32 Aston Martin. And also, similar to the 41, no valid time set. So, by the looks of things, we're now stuck with only one more possibility for a new time on the chart before we see the 119, the 979 and the 54 in rolling formation back to the start-finish line once more, and that'd be the 55 of Asahi Ota. And right now, at least from the onboard telemetry, it showed that it was an invalidated lap, so we'll see whether or not that's fully the case for the number 55. Of course, race winner in round 1, the Japanese talent took a resounding opening win. Could he find his way to pole position once more? Across the line he goes, and third fastest. So looks can be deceiving there. Not an invalidated lap for the 55 Aston, and already snugly fit into that second row. Next to the line then comes the same rolling formation that started qualifying off, the 119, the 979 and the 54 of Lebay, Flop and Wright. Do forgive the dogs today. Across the line then, Currently keeps that stead in about 32 thousandths of a second. That's quickly nullified by Flitzer Flop putting 300ths on his best. And now within 2 thousandths of a second to pole position, right across the line. Sadly to no improvement as Anthony Valorio finds his way now to 4th place. The only time we've yet to see now is out of Carlos Diaz, still from in the pit lane. We just see him emerging now in the Aston Martin. We'll see what the rebuttal is very soon by Asahi Ota. He's on his way out of Schlossgol down towards Rauch. Out of turn 5 into turn 6 now in the 55. On his way out of Worth, out of turn 7 and 8. Now down towards turn 9 at Rin. And it's a deceivingly sharp corner as well. It's got a bit of a smoother entry than this one here at Red Bull Mobile, where you really do have to take a leap of faith over the inside curbs. Down to the line then goes Ota. Needs 455 thousandths of a second for pole position across the line. And no delay there. No improvement for the 55. So one more lap before we see anything of note on the charts there. Nearest to the line at this time, Anthony Valorio on the exit of turn 7 and 8 in the number 41 McLaren. I must say, and this is a point I raised earlier on, it is quite surprising given 20 kilos of added ballast for the 570S, how well McLaren seem to be doing here. Admittedly on a smaller than expected grid, but we're still seeing competition quite lively for McLaren to be up on pole position, and that is no small feat when you're going up against the Leviathan task that is overtaking Christian Lebay in his indomitable performance with Chevrolet. Across the line goes Anthony Valorio, and similar to Ota, no improvements from that second row, so a little bit alarming here for Aston Martin and McLaren. We've already seen good progress out of Flitzer Flop, of which is now only 2 thousandths of a second from the fastest time. Is there any one brand here that stands to the task of dethroning Chevrolet? Nearest to the line, the 119, but this is on an outlap for Christian Lebay. So across the line he goes onto another spurt of flying laps, nearly halfway into this qualifying session. And while it has been a little bit slow to boot, we are still seeing incredibly close gaps on the front row. It could still be decided any which way. We're about to see perhaps another impact of it here. The 55, Asahi Ota, out through turn 10 on his way to the line. Bear in mind, so the gap from before, he needed 455 thousandths of a second to get up to pole position. What can he leverage on this lap? Across the line he goes. And sadly, again, no improvement over his personal best. So plateauing here for Aston Martin's Asahi Ota. Out through turn when he goes on to another flying lap. 54 having crossed the line a moment ago, right onto another flying lap as well. We check in with the nearest driver to the line. It's the number 979 on his way down towards turns 9 and 10. The 41 into the pit lane. There goes Anthony Valorio, looking to re-kit the car before another run in the second half of qualifying today. We see his fellow McLaren down towards the line. Also his fellow competitor over at High Caliber Racing. Across the line goes Flop, and that gap is so minuscule here. It takes literally next to nothing to put him up on the pole position, but it is so close yet so far away in the talks between the 979 and the 119. 11.5 minutes left to go then. Nearest to the line, the 32 of Carlos Diaz on his way down through turn 9 and 10. Across the line. Finally to put time on the charts there. 1.6 seconds off of pole position. Diaz remains in 6th for the time being. Next to the line comes the 119. So we saw the start of his flying lap there, but for Lebay, it seemed invalidated across the line. So he still resides at a 1:35.95 as his best in session. And still only 2 thousandths of a second up the road from Flitzer Flop. The number 55 of Asahi Ota dives for the pit lane, but we thought we would see him down towards the line. This is something to keep note of, is the very thin sliver of tarmac gifted to the drivers here for the run into the pit lane, and grass on either side of it. We have seen incidents before of drivers finding themselves into trouble after a more than exhilarating run into the pits. They're a little too enthusiastic, don't get on the brakes in time, hit one patch of grass, and you could be seeing the tyre wall very quickly. So for Asahi Ota, he was playing very finely with the margins on that 55 Aston. Fortunately, didn't find his way into any trouble, but even with a grid of this size, I'd still say the task is likely. That someone, or the chances I should say, are likely for someone to end up in trouble on that run into the pits. 979 across the line, needed 2,000ths over that last lap. Couldn't find it. Back onto another flying lap as we hit the halfway mark of qualifying today. Nearest to the line again is a 32, then from behind him the 119. So we've yet to see an improvement from either of them. We've seen Diaz finally put times on the chart. We saw considerable improvement from the 32 over the course of free practice. So the chances are here for the 32. Across the line goes Carlos Diaz, 1.6 seconds off the beat right now across the line. And sadly, no improvement this time around. Lebay to the line next in the 119. Chevrolet needs to put a little bit more on that 2,000th of a second gap. He does not like how close that sits between himself and the 979, and no improvement again for the 119. Something seriously awry in the latter half of quali today. Nearest to the line then, the 54 of Wright on that second row, looking to get up and ahead of Asahi Ota. The gap not too far away, but a big kick out on the rear end there is not going to be helping his chances in qualifying today. He's actually finding himself alarmingly close now to losing that second row entirely. Anthony Valorio is only off him by 35,000ths of a second. You can see the McLaren just emerging from the pit lane as we stay on board with the Porsche. We'll have to cut away from the 54 as we see the 979 actually into the pit lane. So we were hoping to see him down towards the line, but looks like running into the pits. And this is what I'm talking about here. It is actually quite sharp, that run in. And you saw a little bit of nose in from the 979. So there could be some troubles further down the line in today's qualifying. We'll leave you on board with Lebay for just a moment. We'll be back in just a second. So still on board with Lebay and still yet to see a gap north of 2,000ths of a second. It is still incredibly tight there at the front row between Flop and Lebay. Neither of them seemingly made any advances up to pole position. Lebay still holds onto it, but by a hair's width in that Chevrolet. Up the road from him there, that's the 41 of Anthony Valorio. Also saw across the line a moment ago was the 979 of Flitzer Flop. Again, still yet to have advanced more than 2,000ths of a second. So we're seeing really quite the sort of stalemate found at that front row. That second row looking a lot closer. The third row looking even closer to the second. We see now an improvement from Valorio, now up to third fastest and ahead of Asahi Ota. Looking at it there by about 18,000ths of a second, I believe. They're about 28,000ths of a second, my mistake. Ota across the line, already back up into it, up and ahead of Valorio. Now puts himself within 0.2 of a second to pole position. So getting closer and closer here. 5 minutes left to go in qualifying for Asahi Ota. Is the opportunity there for a front row start? He's going to need to find quite a lot in the tank here on that 55 Aston. Bear in mind, it's really a 2 for a price of 1 here. If he can get a sizable enough improvement over his own personal best and then get up towards Flitzer Flop, he is already then in touching range of that pole position. As it stands, if you can get one, there is very, very likely the chance you can get both. Buy one and get one free, as it were, for that front row qualifying. We'll catch on board now with the 41 nearest to the line. Actually, up the road would be the 979, his fellow McLaren. What on appears to be an invalid lap for Flitzer Flop. Last round's race winner. Could he find his way to pole position? This is still one of the most finely maintained 0.002 of a second I have ever seen. Across the line he goes. But sadly, to no improvement. To the line then comes Anthony Valorio. We already saw the fight back from Asahi Ota. We do see improvements from Valorio. So in the very final moments of this last qualifying session of the season, we are starting to see some real grit. And that's chiefly coming from, I don't know if you saw that there, it was that run in at turn 1. This something that I remember seeing back in the day. This was on original Assetto Corsas. We've just seen an improvement as well out of Christian LeBay, now opening the gaps up quite a ways to 125 thousandths of a second. So he's made an improvement there of about 123 thousandths to be more specific. Put himself further up the road from Flop, but that's really going to prove to be what it's going to take for him to secure pole. So 3 minutes left to go. Flop still in second, Ota in third, Valorio fourth. Nearest to the line right now, the 979, but he pulls it to a halt out of turns 7 and 8. He's back into the pit lane with enough time right now for him to get out on a new pair of tyres, or a new set of tyres, get out onto the field for one more flying lap. Right now, though, it seems to be content from the 979, keeping him in the pit lane. Nearest to the line at this time, we catch on board with the 41 of Anthony Valorio. He's got one more in the tank for perhaps one, perhaps even 2 more laps before the end of qualifying today. Across the line comes the number 41. Sadly to no improvement, but it appeared to be either an invalid or out lap. We see next to the line comes the 119. We've already seen one improvement out of LeBay. Do we see another across the line? Sadly not the case. Still remains at 125 thousandths of a second between himself and the nearest car. 55 next to the line. We've already seen him leapfrog Anthony Valorio for third place. Now at the front of that second row, he's maintained this quite finely in the 55 Aston Martin. Across the line, sadly, no improvement as we saw that run out wide through turn 10 at Red Bull Mobile. So for Asahi Ota, he does find himself looking onwards towards the front row, but with that gap right now, he's going to have to forge in and around 207. I want to say about 200 and doing the maths here. About 260 odd thousandths of a second to put himself even up in a second place as considerations here. So the front row, still a distant dream for the 55. Anthony Valorio on his way out of turn 7 in towards turn 8. We've seen good hustle so far from McLaren. Could it be an all-McLaren podium row, I should say? The run from first to second row, McLaren 2-3. The chances of a McLaren 1-2 highly unlikely today, given that continual form from the 119 Chevrolet. 1 minute left to go. Anthony Valorio is into the pit lane. That's the end of his qualifying endeavours. Currently, at the best of times, looking to start in 4th place. Following him in as well, content with what he's done so far, LeBay seemingly sitting upon a pole position here in the Red Bull Ring unless anything changes. There's still one more ace in the hole here for Flitzer Flop. He's down towards the line. One more lap before the end of qualifying today. It's one or done for the 979 McLaren. Also out on track with him at the moment is the number 55, Asahi Ota, down across the line from 3rd place. Doesn't find an improvement on this lap, but much like Flop, it's one or done now. One more lap to make this count. Down through turn 1 goes the 55. We'll be watching extensively with these two over the course of their laps seemingly with potentially enough time before the end of qualifying as well. It could be Three's Company as arriving to the line here with about 10 seconds left to go. It's a race against time for Carlos Diaz down in 6th place. But he's managed to just find his way into that final rung of laps here in qualifying. On board with Flitzer Flop. On his way down towards turn 4 at Schlossgold. You can see just off in the distance, around the sort of sweep there on the back straight. There's the Aston Martin just emerging into frame, the 55 of Asahi Ota. This is 2nd and 3rd we're talking about here, all gunning for pole position. 125 thousandths of a second at its closest between Flop and LeBay. Ota still within 4/10 of a second, very nearly within 3. Down through turn 7 we go. You can see, looking for the inside there, retiring to the pit lane. I think we saw the early ambition for it there out of Flitzer Flop. That's the end of his qualifying endeavours. Is it over just yet for Asahi Ota? Barreling out through turn 9. Is he bailing to the pit lane? No, not at all, as a matter of fact. And heading out through turn 10. Could it be pole position for Asahi Ota? Moreover, could it be a front row start for the Aston Martin? Across the line comes the 55 at the end of qualifying today, and that's the end of the road for Asahi Ota. 3rd place in round 8. So now as we wait to see here to the line, Carlos Diaz and the number 32 Aston Martin out through turn 9, heading towards turn 10 here in the Red Bull Ring. And invalidated out past the exit of Rindt. That's the end of qualifying today. A little bit of a lukewarm send-off, really, for the final qualifying session. But we did see, at its best, was a very close gap on the front row. 6 drivers in all left on this grid. Those who remain amongst Season 1 standings, and still potentially some improvements to be found before the very end of Season 1 of the HCCL GT4 Challenge. Definitely a bizarre qualifying indeed, given the low attendee numbers, but this is going to make for a very bizarre scenario when one starts to consider that these 6 drivers, 3 rows in all, will be competing now for an hour of racing. That is definitely going to be quite something. Right now, with no news to announce at this time, that we do have an article of news coming up tomorrow for the NLRL Sunday League that's a little bit more relevant to the people we're working with over there. As of right now, no major news in the last 24 hours. Now we sort of just wait to see how the grid's going to pan out. You can already see it from where we're standing. It's LeBay from Flop, Ota, Villorio, Wright, and Diaz to make a 6-car grid. This might actually be one of the smallest grids we've ever seen get to the starting formation. But we'll see exactly how this pans out. There you can see the grid with about 2 minutes then before the start of the formation lap. Christian LeBay takes another pole position after taking the championship not too long ago. The 119 starts at the front of this 6-car grid today here at round 8 of the championship, with Flitzer Flop in tow on the front row. Previous round race winner in the 979 McLaren. Then in 3rd place, Asahi Ota in the 55 Aston Martin took an inaugural win back in the first round here, all the way back in Monza in heavy rain conditions. Anthony Villorio in 4th place, with Wright in 5th. Diaz rounds out the top 6. Sadly, not an awful lot to discuss at this time. We've already seen a lot of those major beats of qualifying play out. Not really a lot left to debate upon in today's race. The real question is, what is that first lap going to look like, especially when very few of it pertains to anything championship relevant? The championship's already been wrapped up for the 119. For Flitzer, Flop, and Asahi Ota, this is all just points to potentially push them up the standings, but not towards a trophy. So could we be seeing a little bit more white knuckle, a little bit more elbows out amongst these drivers? Of course, they've all got quite good camaraderie for one another heading down towards turn 1. Could we be seeing them get a little bit boisterous in this final round, especially considering there's not an awful lot left to lose in that regard?
30 seconds.
30-second warning given, then we'll be getting on board with Christian Lebay to take us away for the final formation lap of Season 1. What is a very bizarre way to end a season where we started the grid off with, I think it was in the range of about 15 to 20 drivers. We now find only 6 for round 8. So on board with Christian Lebay, the man on pole position once again for one last dance here in Season 1. He slowly pulls away to take the grid with him. 5 cars behind him, the road clear ahead. He makes his way down towards turn 1. Really discussing that grid, we've seen some really solid starts in the last couple of rounds out of Ota and Flop, so this is going to make a very competitive podium right now. Let's not discount as well Anthony Valorio. He's had a very solid start or two over the course of Season 1, so there's a lot to be said over who emerges in the lead as we head down towards Remus at turn 3. Because this is, while it may be a small grid, it is far from being a dull one. You see here, this is Flitzer Flop in second place. He is trying to gun for an extra race win before the season's out, but he's got quite the challenge in front of him there in the form of Christian Lebay. Rich fellow McLaren as well. He's got quite a lot of competition to face off with on that second row alongside Asahi Ota. Looking into those previous race wins over the course of this season, finds that right now, at least in that top 4, 3 of those 4 drivers have had race wins in this championship. But we've also seen in another championship, the Competizione Performance League GT4 Pro-Am Cup America Series, Anthony Valorio took back-to-back wins in the very same number 41 McLaren over at Watkins Glen International. So these are 4 very, very capable GT4 talents we're seeing here go head-to-head under the final round of the championship here in the HCCL GT4 Challenge. Let's not discredit some of the new drivers here. Wright was a late signing into Season 1. He has already made quite the impression here. I think he's going to be taking a little bit more of a backseat role to see how these 4 go head-to-head. He'll have his nearest competition out of Carlos Diaz behind him at the back of this 6-car grid. So back on board with Christian Lebay to lead us down towards turns 9 and 10 on, I must say, is a very bizarre sight to only see 6 cars here. But I suppose we've got to treat this a little bit more like a rallycross heat and less so like a Grand Prix. But heading down towards turn 9, we're on board with the 119 Chevrolet. Well, what left is there to say? What a season it has been here in Season 1 of the HCCL GT4 Challenge. And let's do this one last time. 6 cars in all as we go rolling side by side down towards the line here at round 8 of the championship. It can only end one way, and we're about to see, with 60 minutes against the clock leading from the front there, Christian Lebay at round 8, the season finale. And for the last time in Season 1, we are green and racing here in Austria, heading down towards turn 1 already. A great start by Lebay. There was heavy debate over who could emerge in the race. We see already a brilliant start by the twin McLarens. You could also see trying high around the outside at turn 1 was Asahi Ota to try and get early doors run into second place. Diaz up at ahead of Wright, who now falls down to 6th. We can even see further down the line, great fighting going on here with Anthony Valorio and Carlos Diaz heading down towards turn 3 at Remus. Not the kind of fight he was expecting to find himself in, and then Carlos Diaz goes up the inside in the 32 Aston, side by side and contact with Valorio in the number 41. He now drops behind Diaz. Does he drop behind Wright? As you can see, runs it all the way to the inside for the run down towards Schlossgold. Very, very close stuff here. Was not expecting the intensity out of these three heading down towards Schlossgold. Going later on the brakes, Diaz up and ahead of both Wright and Villorio as he exits Schlossgold there, but a bit of gravel on his left-hand side invites the Porsche back in. We're watching with Villorio's point of view. It's a bit of a squeeze on the run through turn 5, bumps over the grass, very nearly loses the back end of the car as we head into Rauch. Very solid start, I will say. Small but sweet grid here. You can see, though, pulling away Lebay from Flop, from Ota. We see this battle in the bottom three really kicking off proper now with Wright up into 4th place. Diaz up to 5th. Villorio at the back of the field here, having a clash heads with the 32 Aston. Now up and ahead of Carlos Diaz. See the 32 powerless against the McLaren on his run down the opening straight. We head down towards Niki Lauda curve on what is an upgrade of a fight of 5th place now. A fight of 4th between himself and Wright in the number 54 Porsche. Also to keep close in mind, a potential fight going on there for 2nd place. You can see how close the two are from one another, and that could drop down at a moment's notice between Asahi Ota and Flitzer Flop up in 2nd place. Lebay, though, continues to charge up the road in the lead of round 8. We've seen him get one move in already. Let's see if Villorio can go 2 for it on the run into 4th place. Out through turn 4, though, at Schlossgold. Differing lines between himself and the Porsche heading in through turn 5. You can see he hugs the line a little closer on the inside at turn 5 compared to Wright in the Porsche ahead. Heading down into Roll. See a little bit of understeer from the Porsche, as a matter of fact, but he's carrying a little more weight on the run into Worth. Down into turn 9 and 10, though, we've just seen Villorio start to drop away. 0.9, maybe 0.8 of a second between himself and Wright. Does tend to lose that Porsche in through the middle and final. A lot to be discussed there. Let's get a look up the road, though, with the fight going on currently for 2nd place. Asahi Ota in pursuit of Flitzer Flop, the two separated by just half a second in through turn 1. Actually, as I say that, we'll have to cut back away because this has gotten way, way closer in the last observed interval there for Wright v Villorio. 0.3 of a second as they make their way up towards Remus. Now, bear in mind, in the fight of straight line speed, that McLaren is one of the fastest in category. It's up there with the Chevrolet, currently leading the charge of today's race. So for the Porsche, this is a very, very unfavourable spot for him. Out through Remus on his way down towards Schlossgold. All Wright can do here is try and hug centre mass of the road and hope that Villorio does not gun his way to the inside. He's done a good job to keep him to the outside for the run at turn 4, but this could leave him open for a run out here, as it is a parabolic open hairpin right, so Villorio still stands the opportunity to gain more momentum. Much, much harder to defend at a parabolic corner, as no matter what, when you go around the outside, you can just as easily swing it back past the apex and still carry as much momentum as the car in front of you. Now on the exit of turn 7 in towards turn 8, that Porsche is looking a little bit weary here compared to the McLaren. Wright doing the best that he can to defend for 4th place. As a matter of fact, let's see if we can get on board with the defending car of this fight of 4th. That has got to be a daunting sight in the rear view mirror of that Cayman. You can see over the rear view now, looking for the inside. Villorio potentially to make a leap at the Niki Lauda curve, backs out of it on better intuition there. In through turn 1, a little bit of a stab on rotation for the 41, knocked his confidence just a little bit. Bear in mind, not having actually fallen away at all from this fight is Carlos Diaz in the 32 Aston. So if these two continue to get elbows out in their efforts to defend for 4th, they are still leaving the door wide open for the Aston Martin right behind them to come and have a go. Meanwhile, we see the 55 has dropped away dramatically from the 979. Flitzer Flop now 2 seconds up the road from Asahi Ota, down in 3rd place. We're still watching the fight for 4th. in the final round of the championship here in the HCCL GT4 Challenge. Down towards turn 4 we go then. Wright still leading this three-car fight ahead of Valorio and Diaz. Porsche versus McLaren versus Aston Martin for control of 4th. While our top 3 have seemingly disappeared up the road, the bottom 3 have stolen away the limelight here. This has been fantastic fighting from the word go between these 3. Proper elbows out action at its closest point not too long ago. There was that contact through turn 3 at Remus between the 41 and the 32. Right now the 54 just trying to keep length of the road here ahead of Valorio. Currently 0.8 of a second ahead down towards Rin and Red Bull Mobile. You can see that gap continues to open because he's stuck hanging around in the aero wash generated by that Porsche. He gets the benefit on it on the straights, but in every single corner here, that McLaren is floundering. Ironic given the sense that under most circumstances, the McLaren would have quite a few of these cars on the grid pitched for corner rotation, but he's sadly found himself up against the one car that can out-rotate him. That's that practically near rear-engined Porsche 718. Looking now for inside action down into Remus. He backs out of it again, so I think I'm starting to gain an understanding here as to what the motivations for the number 41 are in continuing to do that. It's all mind games. He's trying to force Wright to defend early so that he can have a go of taking position off of him just on the racing line. It's an almost zero effort move, and he loses nothing in the long run, but I think he's grown tired of the mind games now, actually looking for the inside out of turn 4 at Schlossgol. Very easy for drivers to get side by side and then into some serious contact incidents down at this corner. Fortunately, these two managed to avoid that for the time being. In towards Ralk we go. The 54 still fending off for 4th place. Now, there's something I would like to keep note of here, and that's currently at the lead of this race. Now separated by just under a second is Flitzer Flop from Christian Lebay. The Chevrolet and the McLaren look to be potentially fighting for the race lead, so we will be getting a look on with those two in a moment's time. We're still watching on board the fight of 4th between Wright and Valorio, heading down towards turn 9. Carlos Diaz now having dropped away by nearly 2 seconds to this fight. He may be down, but he may be down, but he is not out of that fight, is what I'm trying to get at here. That 32, all it takes is one slip between these two in their fight for 4th, and he's back into it. We've been reiterating that point for some time here. Down towards turn 1 we go. You can see getting closer and closer, more and more confident through the corners now in that 41. And now this is the opportunity to strike. You can see right now holding centre mass of the road, looking a little bit further over to the right as we head out through turn 2. So he's to the outside at turn 2, but more pivotally, he's up the inside at turn 3. He knows the Porsche can go later on the brakes, but it looks like a very brave move around the outside here for Anthony Valorio. Will he have enough steam in the 41 to keep pace up out of turn 3? Yes, that does appear to be the case right now. Right now into the slipstream, down in 5th place. So brave move there by Valorio to retake 4th. Looking further up the road, we're on with Asahi Ota, 2.3 seconds away from the fight between Flop and Lebay. Finds himself in a bit of a lonely drive at the back of the podium. Right now, with what he's doing, he's got more than enough points to overtake Vladislav Mizin in 2nd place of the championship. So he'll be ending things on a relatively high note. 2nd place in Season 1, the way it stands right now for Asahi Ota with Aston Martin. Looking here for Christian Lebay, he's led the race from the word go here, has yet to lose a single lap off of that race lead. So as it stands right now, if Lebay can pull this one off, admittedly on a much smaller grid than I'm sure he was expecting to face today, but he can, and still is within the chances of taking a Grand Slam. Now, it is a bit of an ambitious goal. He's going to have to massively overcut the rest of the grid, go extra long for pit strategy. Of course, with that one mandatory pit stop, he is still going to have to come in at some point today. We've seen that Lebay has quite recently favoured more extreme strategies, those a little bit more out of left field than we've been coming to expect from the 119 over the course of his career in sim racing. We've started to see especially one such case that appears to my mind was actually back in Sunday League Season 4 Round 2 at Valencia. We're picking up on the next round of that coming up tomorrow. But we saw out of him very early pit stops, and as a matter of fact, starting way down in the field, it gave him such an advantage, especially in the searing heat over in Valencia. Could it be extreme strategies that keeps him in constant command of the field today here at round 8. Well, their battle for the lead dissipating right now. We cut back on board with Anthony Valorio and Wright. These two have been at it from the word go as well. It's been very intense fighting in that bottom 3. But as we see now, Wright's actually slowly dropping into field here of Carlos Diaz in the 32 Aston Martin as Anthony Valorio continues to pick up the pace. Now 1.2 seconds up the road from the Porsche right behind him. Now we look on board with Carlos Diaz at the back of the field, but he's getting closer and closer to having a stab at a top 5. Half a second between himself and Wright. We've seen that the Aston Martin is a capable choice used by many over the course of this championship. See, one such example already exists outside of Diaz. The 55 up the road, Asahi Ota has been a prominent user of the V8 Vantage over the course of Season 1. Now looking up the inside, Carlos Diaz to have a go here on Wright for 5th place out through Turn 1, carrying more momentum around the outside. The Porsche continues to stay in the fight here, 0.2 of a second up the road from Diaz in the Aston. Let's stay on board with these two in their fight of 5th place. Now looking potentially for the inside again, this time at Remus. Spaniard versus the American here out through Turn 3. And a little upset there for the 718. The Porsche of Wright had a little bit of a stab of oversteer past the curbs. Now on our way down towards Schlossgold. Turn 4 comes up and looking potentially for the inside again. This has been constant pressure from Carlos Diaz. Out through Schlossgold, now at the inside at Turn 5. You can see the V8 just giving him a little bit more stab on the throttle compared to the flat 6 in that Porsche. Still to the inside at Rauch. Leaves Diaz without much of a line here to come and have a go for 5th this time around. Now heading into Worth. Is he looking for it once more? Looking over the rear view of that Aston Martin. What a noise as well. 4-litre AMG twin-turbo V8 under the bonnet there of that V8 Vantage. See big amounts of understeer, though, caught in the aero wash and a little too late on the brakes out of Turn 9 at Rindt. Good recovery, though, by Diaz as we saw the car over-rotate through Turn 10. So a bit of a spotty run into that 3rd sector, and that has lost him a bit of time in the long run compared to his fight with Wright up in front of him. That now out by half a second as they head to Niki Lauda curve. Stay on board with Diaz as things look to pick back up out of Remus. Onto the gravel goes Diaz. That fight for 5th place may be over at this time. 1.6 seconds now between Wright and Diaz, but I'd say you can definitely see these two pick back up later on after that pit wave, coming up more likely than not in the next 15 minutes. After 15 minutes of racing, we're on board now with the 55 of Asahi Ota to take a look at where the grid stands as of this time. Flop in 2nd with the fastest lap, but LeBay leads by just about 2.5 seconds. Asahi Ota in 3rd place. Anthony Valorio back up to 4th, ahead of Wright and Diaz to make this very small pint-sized grid at round 8 of the championship. I suppose it was always going to end up in this direction, though this is, of course, after the championship has been wrapped up. A lot of drivers don't feel all too inclined to come along and compete for something that doesn't really count towards anything in the long run. Hence why we were only really left with about 6 cars on the grid. It is kind of part and parcel of every sim racing championship we've ever covered, is this typically does happen. Weirdly enough, though, if I had to think back, this is not the smallest grid we've ever seen to the checkered flag in Austria. In fact, a long time ago, and this is going to be nice little story time here on TRTN, reliving some of the earliest days of my career as a commentator for sim racing. I have to think back to when I was covering the TRR F1 Virtual. And there was one such round, I believe this to be back in, it was either 2021 or 2022's F1, so it was a few years back now. And the first couple of seasons, there was a round in Red Bull Ring. It was the Austrian Grand Prix, as it was known for us. And if I remember correctly, I can't remember if it was Tier 1 or Tier 2. It was one such category where only 3 drivers finished. So and it didn't start originally as 3 drivers. I think they were still like double figures, but it was an absolute slaughterhouse. I think it's one of the times I've been genuinely so baffled by a race. I imagine that's somewhat of the magic that makes Red Bull Ring such an attractive choice for leagues nowadays. It wasn't originally when it shipped. I don't really recall many leagues being that interested about the Red Bull Ring when it was added into the game with the GT2s. I think a lot of people didn't see it as strong enough of a justification to get the GT2 pack because they didn't really care for the GT2s themselves. I've only seen a handful of leagues to have really paid much mind to the GT2s, which is a shame. I would say that is a genuine shame because I liked that DLC. I think it was a cool idea. I think GT2 is quite unexplored, or underexplored, I should say, for sim racing games, but now you can kind of see the reason why. When people think of GT2, they're not thinking of modern SRO or FIA GT2. They're thinking of what GTE became, or like turned in, what was turned into GTE, I should say. GT2 started off as the endurance variation of GT3. That later became GTE and then became LM GT3. And towards turn 3, we're on board with the 119. The race leader at the moment, Christian Lebay, took pole position here in the Red Bull Ring, has commanded the field for the last 20 minutes of racing here at round 8. Sadly, not a lot to consider for the future of this series. Of course, we are at that final round now. No further stops from here on out. We don't get to discuss where will we be later on in the championship. This is the final stop for Season 1. Now, I've not got any confirmations from the folks over on HCCL as to when this will return, but there is a likelihood that it will, given its popularity at the start of the season. We don't have a current confirmed date for when GT4 Season 2 will be out, but know that it is definitely a likely consideration at this time. Currently monitoring those gaps then between the leading pair. Flop 2.6 seconds from Lebay. Now, to keep in mind the gap between himself and Asahi Ota, we take a look here, and it's also around 2.6 seconds. So in perfect equilibrium on the podium. So I suppose whilst we've got the opportunity, let's discuss the imminent arrival of the next big event here in the High Caliber Community League, the Carousel Cup. Now, this is going to be an exciting little premise because it consists of 3 runs at the same destination, of course, the Nürburgring Nordschleife N24 layout, of which we've seen actually quite recently on our broadcast week here on TRTN. And currently, where it's structured to start, so November 29th, the same time frame that we see here today for the GT4 Challenge. The first round consists of 60 minutes in the M2 CS. Now, I'm actually looking forward to seeing how that plays out because this will be the first time ever on TRTN we will see the BMW M2 CS compete here on ACC. It is a very niche choice of vehicle, so it's very cool to see time in and time out that leagues are continuing to pursue more niche options. I think we've seen the beginning of it here with the Competizione Performance League Jaguar GT3 Revival, another series we've been covering most recently. We came out of the Circuit of the Americas on Wednesday. And it's going to be fun to see more and more leagues pick this up just before what I'm assuming is going to be, in the next couple of months, the tone death of ACC, because we're starting off with Project Motor Racing around the corner. And if that delivers on release, and that does deliver on an experience people are gunning for, the chances for leagues to continue to operate solely on ACC is a limited option. And I don't see it surviving past 2026, in brutal honesty. Looking further down the line then for the Carousel Cup Round 2 is set to consist of 75 minutes in the GT4s. Now that's going to be an absolute riot, given that we've already had a full season of GT4 competition. We know that these drivers know these cars now like the backs of their hands. We've seen some fantastic racing over the course of Season 1 of the GT4 Challenge. That's going to be with one stop for fuel and tyres. Same story with the M2s as well. Failed to mention that. One stop for fuel and tyres. Now, this is the more poignant part. Round 3, the finale round. GT3s for 90 minutes and 2 stops for fuel and tyres. A bit more of a strategic element introduced past Round 2. And of course, we get to see the GT3s once again tackle the Nürburgring, and that was fantastic to see it the last time around for the season opener of VSR Phoenix Season 10. Just a moment on that, though, the 54 in trouble, right, with a temporary yellow flag, had an incident out of Turn 3, now past the gantry in towards Turn 4, I should say, and is now in 6th place behind Carlos Diaz, who now moves up into 5th in the 32 Aston. Having a look as to who has signed up for the Carousel Cup. Of course, we have a lot of drivers returning from the GT4 Challenge and also from other areas of operation here on HCCL. But to name some of the drivers that we've been seeing over the course of the last couple of months in GT4, we've got drivers like Anthony Valorio, Matthew Copsey, looking here on the list as well. Tom Wells competing, Stephen Sutton also competing, Fabiano Bartoletti competing as well. Christian Lebay returns as well, and Manuel Verzi. Then we have a lot of drivers that we already endemically recognise in the community. So there's a lot of drivers that are already on my radar. Quite a few actually from MSA have taken an interest in this championship, namely Bjorn Egil Kalsef, Benjamin Hooper and David Silf, among others. We can also see some other drivers here. Pascal Stoltz from NRW Performance finds his way into the championship for the Carousel Cup. We can also see joining the championship as well is Alejandro Gonzalez. I believe we have seen his performance before. We also have Alexander Hivrich, who we've most recently seen on the Sunday League. We also see Corey Aiken joining him as well. Shane Tremblay, though, making a return to potential viewership here on TRTN. That's been the first time we've seen him since the end of Season 1 of the NLRL Sunday League, so it's good to be reunited with a familiar name. We also see Matthias de Munster. We've seen him over on, I believe it was the XCL Pro Series we were commentating for, where we last saw Matthias de Munster. I believe he's also set to compete in the Sunday League. Now that's just scratching the surface at drivers in there. Also another recognisable name is James Mason with the former K1 Esports team. They've now since undergone quite an extensive rebranding campaign. We'll talk about that tomorrow in the new segment for the NLRL Sunday League, because it's a little bit more relevantly spent over there. As K1, now known as the 5-star sim racing team, or 5-star esports team, I should say, have a little less of a known presence here in HCCL. Looking further around the field, not really much left to discuss. We hit the halfway mark in about 5 minutes' time, with the broader discussion of those pit lane runs still on the table. We are expecting to see them at least begin in the next 5 or so minutes. Now, it could be a case here that with unpredictable circumstances come unpredictable choices, and could be seeing a lot of the drivers make a little bit more of a risky late lunge to the pit lane, following on the same kind of extreme strategies we've been observing firsthand off of the leading 119 over the course of the last couple of weeks across a myriad of championships. See a little bit of stuttering though when we were on board just a moment ago with Flitzer Flop. That is a bit of a concern for him here, as it's easy positions in today's race. He will not be arguing with taking a podium by the end of this round. Currently in a very comfy second place, 2.1 seconds up the road from Asahi Ota. I want to point out, though, that Aston Martin seemingly is now on a bit of a push before the end of his first stint, before he comes in and takes brand new tyres. In terms of driver of the day, I mean, we are strapped for choice. We're still quite honoured by the fact that the TRTN driver of the day is an officially recognised accolade now on HCCL. We see into the pit lane, so Christian Lebay won't be taking that Grand Slam as he's now lost the prerequisite to have led every single lap here. He actually goes earliest of any driver for a run into the pit, so that was quite a bizarre one, quite the curveball. I think he was attempting to... he either already had it in his mind that he was going to go around the halfway mark or a little before the halfway mark. Either that or he's been consciously listening in on the stream, which we know that a lot of the drivers are doing, and has decided to throw us a bit of a curveball. Now that puts Flop up in the lead, with Ota now in second, off by 2 seconds and closing. So there is that active push towards that move for Asahi Ota. He's no longer dormant in this fight for what was originally second. Now looking at a fight of the lead before they make a run into the pit lane. We'll see what is the decision making here between the 979 and the 55. Are either of them having a look to go into the pit lane? We're on board with the 55 of Asahi Ota. Watching up in front, you can see that yellow McLaren up the road, the 979 of Flitzer Flop. Neither of these two having a look into the pit lane just yet. They're going to stay out on the run into lap 17 here at the Red Bull Ring. Gap currently 1.8 seconds, so down from what was 2.1 not long ago between Flop and Ota. There is still that constant push forward by the 55 to get up into the lead of this race. That now drops to nearly a second and a half. Bear in mind, this is an area where the McLaren has been able to at least gain a considerable chunk of time. Right now, we'll see whether or not that's the case between him and the Aston Martin behind. Bear in mind, now coming up on the pit lane entry, already having seen that pit lane run from Lebay earlier on in today's race. Are either of these two considering their odds to run into the pits this time around? The 55 stays out, and the 979 stays in the pit lane. So going in goes Flitzer Flop. Asahi Ota now takes the lead of round 8 of the championship, but by how much longer will he hold on to that title? Seeing here with Christian Lebay, the man who previously led the race from the start, earliest into the pit lane, and now we'll see where he stacks up against the 979 of Flitzer Flop, currently in the pits as we speak. Out through turns 7 and 8, we're on board with the 119. Tremendous sound of that Chevrolet engine. 6.2 litre LT1 naturally aspirated V8 engine sourced from the Camaro SS.
We are halfway through. Keep it up.
As you've heard, they're halfway into the race, 30 minutes left to go. Past that halfway mark, we've already seen upper position into 5th for Christian Lebay. Now up and ahead of Flitzer Flop, who we just saw been released from the pit lane. The question therein remains, with Lebay now already on the charge, what is the current decision for Asahi Ota? We're just past the halfway mark now. This would be the perfect time for a pit stop. The 55 seemingly having opened the gaps up already past the 979, could stand to be up and ahead of him by the time he exits the pits. He stays up for one more lap, confident that right now where he stands he can forge even more of a gap. He wants to make this damn certain before he leaves the pit lane that he's going to be ahead of Flitzer Flop's 979 McLaren. He was getting closer and closer here, so I think he's just leveraging the last of what he's got on these tyres in that Aston. Must say, still one of the best looking liveries on this field. I would say it's a case where we've got probably 3 of the series' most iconic liveries now, one of them being Asahi Ota's Aston Martin. That's clad in, I believe that is podium green. That's the official name of that colour, and that's the one that you see on the safety car in Formula 1. It's also what you see on a lot of the modern Astons now. You can actually buy a V8 Vantage in podium green. You can configure that online via the Aston Martin website, and that's how I found out what the name of the colour was. Got bored one day, was looking through all of their colours. You know, they can sell you a car in purple. Very bizarre. Also see, among those iconic liveries, I'd definitely say you'd be taking a look at either variation of the high caliber racing yellow. That would be either the 979 or the 41 of Flop and Valorio. I'd still say one of the most iconic liveries on this grid, though, is still the Malwar Racing colours of the 119. Now up to third after a pit lane run there for Wright and for Diaz. When we saw that move over towards the Malwar Racing colours, this was after we had seen quite a few different colours come out of the 119 Aston Martin of Christian Lebay back in his time in GT3 racing, before he made that conscious move to establish the Malwar Racing team. I think these colours definitely best suit that Chevrolet. We've seen him on a few different cars. We've seen him on some Bentleys. We've seen him on the V12 Vantage that took the first championship in the NLRL Sunday League. Now we see it here on the Chevrolet Camaro. It's been a very prominent figure over the course of the championship, and I imagine it's probably a pretty good ambassador for the Malwar Racing team's capabilities, considering Christian Lebay has dominated this season in the very same Chevy. With Asahi Ota now in the pit lane, he is vulnerable to Christian Lebay. The real question is, he's not looking to overtake Lebay here, but he is looking to be ahead of Flitzer Flop. And now, as we've just seen, potentially there, has he been released? He's engaged first gear. He's yet to have pulled away in the 55. So with the 119 closing in very shortly, not too far away from him will be Flitzer Flop. Can Asahi Ota get out of the pit lane in time? He is cleared, and off of the jacks he goes towards the limiter line, so he will lose out position to Lebay. But can he take second place off of Flitzer Flop? This could be tactical masterclass for the 55 of Asahi Ota by the looks of it, as we head in towards the Niki Lauda curve. He's just about done it there. Brilliant stuff for the 55 of Asahi Ota, playing the long game for positions here. Bear in mind, Anthony Valorio still yet to have taken a pit lane run, so this is still technically for third, but it will be provisionally, by the looks of things, for second place. So that is a position gain through the pits for Asahi Ota, playing the thinking man's game in that 55 Aston. Lebay, though, on the warpath. He's got 38 seconds between himself and Valorio, no matter what. Now, when that McLaren comes into the pits, first place is back up for grabs. We'll see, though, from the 41, as yes, swinging into the pit lane goes Anthony Valorio after having led the race for, I think, a lap or two there here in the Red Bull Ring. In goes the 41. We'll see where he exits in comparison to both Ota and Flop. See here for Flitzer Flop, 2.4 seconds now in the opposite direction, where he once held this gap over Asahi Ota. Asahi Ota now holds that gap over him. See the two on the exit of turns 7 and 8. We'll catch on board here with Christian Lebay, who's about to retake the race lead here in the 119 Chevrolet. Really quite a bizarre story when you consider how popular Chevrolet was at the start of the season. Now with Christian Lebay the only driver left to use the Camaro. But as you can see there, running down the pit lane with Valorio in the pits, now back up into the lead here in round 8. 25 minutes left to go here at the Red Bull Ring before the end of season 1 in its entirety, and already having gained the championship, Lebay looking for one more reward on top. This is all about the satisfaction of it now for the 119. Another race win under his belt is nothing to scoff at the end of season 1. That'll be his 4th this season, if we are to believe correctly. 24 minutes left to go then. Now exiting the pit lane behind Flop. Now the question is, can he be ahead of Diaz? By the looks of it, that looks to be the case, as he's up the road from the 32. keeping an eye here on his fellow McLaren up the road. Blitzer Flop looking to take the fight to Asahi Ota, but now with clean air over the nose of that 55, Ota is really able to spread his wings in the Aston Martin. It's a very bizarre sound when you come to sort of sit down and listen to the engines. That McLaren, it's a really odd tone for a V8 engine. It's very throaty, almost. I mean, it's nothing compared to the more traditional sounding V8s that we get out of Chevrolet, or even for that matter out of AMG with their export license built M177, which we see under the bonnet of the Aston Martin V8 Vantage. That has got to be, I will say this without a shadow of doubt, that has got to be the best sounding GT4 in circulation right now. That Chevrolet is just unfathomable on this game. I can't speak for real life because there's more than just the options we have here. And namely on one such game, Project Motor Racing, that's coming out very soon, they do have a GT4 ensemble, including the 7th generation Ford Mustang, which I have been quite a proprietor of requests for that to be in the game. I really have wanted to see that brought in. And another car as well, the Toyota GR Supra, was also brought into Project Motor Racing, where we have also been requesting it here on TRTN for it to be added into ACC. So it's going to be fun to see how those two stack up against the remainder of the field. One thing, though, that's definitely going to send a bit of a chill down the spine of the 119 of Christian LeBay is the note that in GT4 there is no Chevrolet. That is a bizarre sign. Chevrolet haven't got their Camaro on the entry list for Project Motor Racing's car list. That is a very bizarre one. So he'll have to either compromise and go back to Aston Martin, or he's going to go over to Ford. It's going to be exciting to see if we see drivers like LeBay make their way over to Project Motor Racing and what is, I imagine, the sort of coming emigration of the console sim racing community over towards Project Motor Racing, and then later on down the line over to Le Mans Ultimate, where that releases in 2026. It's going to be curious to see what a lot of these drivers do, because as we can see, he's grown quite attached to that Chevrolet. In fact, he's almost inseparable of it in GT4. I don't think I've seen him drive anything else. So will it be that choice that he moves over to Ford, or is that almost blasphemy when you consider his loyalty to General Motors and Chevrolet? You could also make the argument, though, with LeBay that I think it's more a style preference. He's gunning for cars that are a little bit looser around the edges, that have that front engine rear drive, more predictable handling style that he can really get down to fine details with and tune to his perfection, to his liking, as it were. And we've seen that preference carry across in a lot of what Malwar Racing continues to operate with. We've seen Bentleys, we've seen Astons, we've seen Chevrolets. Even in other walks of GT4, we've seen more Astons. Timo de Tosto, one such driver that was in the top 10 coming into today's championship standings, we saw him compete with Aston Martin. So there is an overarching presence, or preference as I should say, for front engine rear drive cars. So maybe that move to Ford would be quite suiting for LeBay heading into Project Motor Racing. That's, of course, if he gets Project Motor Racing. We can't say that if he will. In fact, we've yet to actually ask him at all if he will. So I'll be curious to see where that goes. I think a lot of people are looking forward to it. It's definitely going to be quite an interesting game. Back into the here and now, though, we find Anthony Valorio stranded in 4th place, 20 seconds away from either 3rd or 5th. And a lonely, lonely drive here at the end of the championship. 19 minutes left to go before we get to close the curtains here on Season 1. Looking forward towards the Carousel Cup later on this month. And then into 2026, the Multi-Class Championship Season 3. See here with Flitzer Flop, 2.9 seconds. So the gap actually having since opened up between himself and Asahi Ota. So I've got to say, that is real some tactical masterclass there. I'd say that is definitely driver of the day worthy. Since we have to pick now a driver, I would say it's rather decidedly so. That's on the grounds. He can get to the checkered flag where he's at right now. I'd say that would be Asahi Ota easy bookings for driver of the day, because that was quite cheeky and it was quite cunning there. He played his hand very, very nicely. So in a recent poll conducted by High Caliber Community League over the interest for Project Motor Racing, there was an overwhelming presence of both looking forward to it, that yes, there will be people buying the game, and there's a lot of people that are on the fence and are waiting for it. But what that really does reveal to us is that there is still an overwhelming intrigue toward the game as opposed to staying on ACC. Only 5 people aren't going to be decidedly getting the game. Oh, and actually, funny enough, looking into this data, LeBay was one of those drivers saying not interested in PMR or staying on ACC, so I don't think we ever will see a move to Ford. So we have to start considering the drivers who did vote for that they will be getting the game. So among them, we can see on this list already drivers that have competed this season. We've seen Tom Wells, we've seen Stephen Sutton, Asahi Ota, Ben Knight, Anthony Valorio. We also see Byron Forrest, John Prine also on that list as well. That's just to name a few of the drivers who voted. We also have there Cas van Veltzen voting yes that he will be getting Project Motor Racing. So it's going to be an exciting time with a lot of staple names in this community on ACC making that big move over. Now we can see them drive all manner of things over on Project Motor Racing. I think what a lot of people are excited for is to finally get their hands on the prototypes, the GTPs of the IMSA Sports Car Championship. And on that car list, if my memory serves correctly, they have not only Cadillac, they have Acura, they have Lamborghini, they have Aston Martin's Valkyrie, the Heart of Racing one that we see in IMSA. We've also got Porsche, and weirdly enough, also Toyota, the GR010, despite being a Le Mans hypercar and not a Le Mans Daytona hybrid. To give some perspective, the last time that anyone was able to get their hands on GTPs in a racing game, not just saying sim racing, but in a racing game, was Forza Motorsport, released in 2000 and I think it was 2022, 2023, and we all know how that went. This will be their first proper chance to have a go with the new toys of the IMSA Sports Car Championship. I think where I'm personally excited for the game as well is the older cars, the GTs. So you've got cars like the Gillet Vertigo, you've got the Saleen S7, you've got the TVR Tuscan. I'm looking forward to seeing how those play out. They've got cars like, they've got the Aston Martin DBR9. I mean, that is one of my favourite race cars. I'm thoroughly looking forward to seeing how that plays out. And I'm sure the folks at HCCL are carrying on that same sentiment. It's a lot more open-ended as well. They could feasibly just do more GT3 and GT4 stuff, but the chances are there for some proper good fun. And the game, so I'm told, from the developers at least, will ship with a ranked mode. So there is emphasis on competitive play coming up on launch. So there's definitely going to be some underlying support from a lot of the communities here on console, hoping for the game's success. because this could be huge. I think this would be the first big shift we've seen since the end of the Project Cars 2 era for a lot of leagues. When that sort of was delicensed and was taken off of the Microsoft Store, that was the big shifting point for a lot of people to move over to ACC. Right now, it's the only choice a lot of people still feel as if they have, outside of something, say, for example, like Formula 1. "14 minutes left to go, so we're nearly in our final 10 minutes of racing, over 3/4 of an hour into this race so far. This is where it stands right now. LeBay back into the lead. Asahi Ota having gained position over Flitzer Flop over a cunning pit strategy in the number 55. Now the number 979 of Flop down in third, with Anthony Valorio in fourth, Carlos Diaz in fifth, and Wright in sixth. After an incident down at turn 3 put him behind Diaz, he's yet to have regained the gap ever since. You can see, though, he's getting closer and closer by the lap. 2.9 seconds at the last recorded interval, and seemingly gaining ground on the Aston. So there will be that potential fight for the back of the top 5 by the end of today's race. But time is ticking. 13 minutes left to go. Not much longer left in round 8. A very quiet round. We do apologise for the more awkward gaps between major commentary notes. It's just for the simple fact I don't think any of us were expecting only 6 cars at the final round, but these are probably 6 of the most dedicated drivers on this grid. They wanted to show out to this round, knowing that it's effectively, by the way that things are wrapped at the moment, save for a few examples, namely Asahi Ota among them there, that this is basically a non-championship round. It's almost an exhibition run, with the main championship title already having been wrapped up a few rounds ago. These are 6 of the most dedicated drivers towards this championship, and really it's been quite a blast to see how they've tackled it by themselves. Something to note as well, it's just pertaining to the gap right now between Asahi Ota and Christian LeBay. Now, we've been keeping a little bit of an eye on this over the course of the last couple of laps, but something I am starting to notice is there is a bit of a slow bleed here for the gap of the lead of this race. The 119 now down past the 5-second margin is actually dropping a few tenths of a second per corner. Something, not entirely sure what, seems to be wrong with the 119, or moreover seems to be right with the 55. Down through turn 10. LeBay now only 4.5 seconds. Yes, it is slowly bleeding away. So Asahi Ota is on a final 10-minute push to try and get up towards the Chevrolet, potentially to fight for the race lead. Could he once again return to the top step after the first round of the championship? Only time will tell us different. Right now, they make their way out of Niki Lauda curve, back on the run uphill. 119, 4.6 seconds up the road, and seemingly they're climbing past turn 1, now into turn 2. This is really where the Chevrolet gets to come into its own, is in these straightaway sections where it is practically, in the hands of LeBay at least, unrivaled for straight line speed. So a little under 10 minutes left to go here in round 8 of the championship. It's been a little quiet throughout, but we have seen those little spats of action here and there. You see here with Flitzer Flop, he's dropped even more time away now from Asahi Ota, settling into the rhythm for a podium finish as the season wraps. Let's just going to look here. This is a developing fight right now, 2.8 seconds And seemingly, by the looks of things, per corner closing between Diaz and Wright. There could be that fight for the back of the top 5 in the next couple of laps here, with about 9 minutes coming onto it left to go. About 7 or so, maybe 7 or 8 laps left in the race overall. Could be even less than that, actually. On board with Carlos Diaz. The gap now 3.1 seconds, so it could be swinging back in the Aston Martin's favour in the next 7 or so minutes. We did see it was slowly burning in there for Wright to catch up to Diaz by the end of this race, but that seems to be quite carefully maintained now by the Aston Martin. He's got a little bit of a wriggle on in the last 2 laps to put himself even further up the road. Now fluctuating in the high 2s, very low 3s at the best of times for Carlos Diaz. We see here with Flitzer making his way down towards turn 1. The gap currently between himself and Asahi Ota, 4.7 seconds. Now 4.6 past the exit of Niki Lauda curve, bounces back up to 4.7. You can see when we get onto the straightaways, McLaren, despite normally being presumed as one of the fastest in the straight lines, they've really been done in over the course of this race by Aston Martin. Once he's gotten clear of him over the run through the pits, Asahi Ota has not let that gap falter. Been very solid defensive second place, playing for the long game here, and really with very, very few elements involved in terms of drivers in this race. He has had to play very, very focused, as it were, against Flop. He's not had to consider really anything else. He's had a lot of time to focus this gap in. Now seeing here, getting closer and closer, 2.7 seconds, still a very carefully maintained margin between the 32 and the 54. Now, by the way that it stands right now, I don't even see that falling in the next 4 minutes. We've got about 3 more laps left in this race before we wrap up Season 1 of the Championship here on the HCCL GT4 Challenge, with Christian Lebay leading down towards turns 9 and 10. not too far away from him. 5.1 seconds down the road, Asahi Ota, and then another 5 seconds down the road for Flitzer Flop. And towards Schlossgold then. We're on board at the moment with Flitzer Flop. Only 3 minutes left to go then here in the Red Bull Ring. It has been a fantastic championship, really. Reflecting on where things have been over the course of Season 1, we've had quite a few highs and quite a few lows, and definitely some compelling stories along the way, especially for Flitzer Flop. He took that race win the first time he's done so this season, back in round 7 at the Hungara Ring. 4 different manufacturers, 4 different drivers to have taken race wins this season. And it looks to stay that way, as we've only 2.5 minutes left to go. We're heading on to that penultimate lap, and the next lap coming. I believe we are on the penultimate lap, because it'll be the final lap next. You see the gap is starting to get alarmingly close now between Diaz and Wright. Could we be seeing the elements of a very, very final lap dash out of Wright? 1.6 seconds and closing. Looking at it there in the last lap, he was a 10th up over Diaz. The Aston Martin drawing closer and closer to him at the back of that top 5, out through Niki Lauda curve. Could the pressure be getting to the 32 of Diaz? 1.6 seconds, carefully maintained, 1.5 nearly as we head up towards turn 2. This could be all for... It could be all or not, really, between these two. One more lap left to decide that. The 119 down towards the line to begin the final lap in a moment's time. That's Christian Lebay in the Chevrolet down through turn 10. Diaz could be under siege, though, as he makes his way now out of Remus towards Schlossgold. Bear in mind, he's got one more lap after this lap right now. He'll be on to lap 36 before the race concludes. He could be under attack in a moment's notice here. That Porsche is gaining significant ground. We had a little stumble out through turn 4, and it might have just been enough to undo all of the progress there that has been so vehemently chipped away at by Wright. It was one slip at Schlossgold, and now he's back at square one. Catch up with these two a little later on. We take a look around the field here. Asahi Ota 5.2 seconds up the road from Flitzer Flop. And this has been a very carefully maintained 5-second interval from all 3 of these drivers on the podium right now. Asahi Ota easily takes our driver of the day vote here on TRTN. It was a very compelling pit strategy that put him up at extra position on what was a very close fight between himself and Flitzer Flop. It was ultimately decided on strategies. That was very, very clever out of the 55 today. Looking on, though, with Christian Lebay, we head into Worth Corner at turns 7 and 8. Just on the exit of Rauch. And it has been definitely a bizarre round, a little bit quieter than we were expecting. Not that I think Christian Lebay will be arguing at all with the circumstances of it. As heading down towards the line, the checkered flag does await the arrival of the 119. It'll be his 4th race win this season, making his way out of turn 9, now towards turn 10. Here in the Red Bull Ring to round out season 1, to the checkered flag comes Christian Lebay, who wins in Austria A brilliant performance for the Chevrolet right at the very last chapter of Season 1. What a way to wrap things out. The championship and 4 race wins in all. A brilliant, brilliant result then for Christian LeBay. And what a championship to revere in. Following him there to the line. Second place for Asahi Ota and driver of the day. Flitzer Flop finishes 3rd. There's your podium, folks, and what a season these 3 have had. Believe from the points there that Asahi Ota will move up to 2nd in the championship ahead of Vladislav Mizin, but there you can see your race winner for today, joined by the 2 podium sitters of round 8, and also your champion of Season 1, Christian LeBay. Joining them there on what is podium celebrations, just outside of the podium, Flitzer Flop. Actually, sorry, on the podium, I should say, because there's your actual... So it momentarily showed him down in 4th, but no, he is on the podium there. And joining him is Anthony Velorio for the celebrations. Carlos Diaz finishes 5th, and Wright finishes 6th. Had there been one more lap, you can see they were only divided by a second to the line. Had there been one more lap, there could have been a fight for 5th. That's the end of the line then for what has been a brilliant season all around here in Season 1 of the HCCL GT4 Challenge. And rounding out Round 8's results, we have another win on the charts for Christian LeBay. On the podium then, Asahi Ota and Flitzer Flop, Anthony Velorio 4th, Carlos Diaz in 5th, and Wright in 6th. What a season it's been then, folks. And it's been a real pleasure from us on TRTN to have been covering it every step of the way. It may have been a bit of a quieter exit to Season 1, but I'm sure that everything will be picking up rather nice and dandy heading into the end of this month when we pick up on the Carousel Cup, starting off on that first round of 3 with the BMW M2 CSs. Well, that's all from us here on TRTN. It has been a real pleasure from us here. And hopefully, for the folks at HCCL, we'll be seeing you again by the end of November. That's all from us now. Take care. Good night.